has been chosen. Thank you.
Just from moments ago, Liz Truss, a very brief statement right outside 10 Downing. Speaking to reporters, she met with the chairman of the 1922 committee. And he, after discussions with him, she has decided to step down, citing the fact that her economic policies have come a cropper, if you will. If Pranav Bhanot is still there, Pranav, so essentially she's saying that what she was voted for as the leader of the Conservative Party, she was not able to implement that agenda. A large part of that agenda, of course, was tax cuts, particularly in the wealthiest bracket, if you will. That turned out to be deeply unpopular. And also the fact that at a time when the middle class is really getting beat because of the rising cost of living in the UK, as well as, of course, imported inflation because of the Ukraine war, there was a feeling that these tax cuts for the rich and wealthy was simply not going down well with the wider British public. It seemed tone deaf. It seemed counterproductive. And now we can see why, because it's not just the finance minister, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who was asked to resign. This was the mini budget. This was his brainchild. And then subsequently now, after losing support within the Conservative Party, Liz Truss, after just a month and a half as Prime Minister, has stepped down. Sanjay Suri finally through on the broadcast. Sanjay, what a dramatic turn of events. What an anticlimax. I mean, at the time that she was sworn in as Prime Minister, comparisons were being made to Margaret Thatcher. Liz Truss barely lasting a month and a half.
Well, the comparisons to Margaret Thatcher were always a bit misplaced. Some of the support that she got was a sworn opposition to Rishi Sunak. But as quality went of the candidates, as quality of minds go, as quality of leadership and certainly potential leadership at that time, Rishi Sunak was miles ahead. But she made promises that were unrealistic, that were false, and she should have known them to be false. It's very unleader-like not to have known that, to have promised tax cuts across the board. It sounds very good in the short term that everyone thinks that, well, we're going to pay less tax, there's going to be more money. There was no answer where this money is going to come from. That's where Rishi Sunak had challenged her. She had no answer except to ridicule and rubbish Rishi Sunak's views. And the minute those views of her hit contact with the reality, of course, these were not such that could be implemented at all. One after the other disaster followed in terms of policy, which he U-turned on one after another. And then, of course, other people were seeing this happening. Everybody across the party. Suella Braverman provided the trigger. And if you like, it is one Indian who brought down one Prime Minister, and then another one of Indian origin brought down the following Prime Minister. And of course, we can expect Suella Braverman and Rishi Sunak to be very much in the race now.
So what happens now? In that statement that she made outside 10 Downing, she said there's going to be a leadership election in the next week. Will that be like what we saw in the race for the Conservative Party leadership that we saw after Boris Johnson stepped down? It was almost like a public fight. Whoever wanted to throw their hat in the ring did so. Or is this election going to be more behind the scenes, wheeling and dealing, and whoever has support of the majority of the MPs, that person goes on to become the next Prime Minister?
Well, this is what we're going to hear very soon now from Sir Graham Reddy. He heads the 1922 committee, as it's called, and that handles the parliamentary affairs of the Conservative Party. Almost certainly, we are not going to have another 6 weeks of campaigning among Tory members, following weeks of voting among the parliamentary members. That whole process was far too luxurious by today's timetable. No one has the time, no one has the will for a repeat of any of that. But clearly, Sir Graham Reddy will be setting out some method. There has to be some form of representation. It cannot be simply the case that Liz Truss names a successor and that person takes over, unless as a very brief filler. So we're going to hear exactly what this will look like. It does appear that if this were to go down to the Conservative Party members in some sort of a quick vote, it's very likely Boris Johnson will be in. But if it is a matter among Conservative MPs, very likely Sunak will be in.
So break that down for us. If it is members of Parliament, you are suggesting that Sunak does stand a good chance. But if they go back to the almost, 200,000 odd members of the Conservative Party, then again, we might see another, for want of a better phrase, another white candidate as the next Prime Minister?
Yes, we have seen indications of that already. When the first stage of voting was held in the last round following the exit of Boris Johnson, we had a majority of, or not quite the majority, but the largest number of MPs who voted for Rishi Sunak. And the reason we have to be very careful in understanding that this was not a majority, that Rishi did not get majority support in Parliament. He just got the highest number among the candidates who were contesting. Now, if that is an indication, certainly he stands a very good chance. And not just that, it is his credentials that will now speak. Liz Truss hit the rocks over economic policy. And that is where Rishi Sunak is strong. He's seen as a rock when it comes to financial policies. And given the turbulence over policy and over decisions, Rishi Sunak is likely to be trusted. And that will add to the popularity he won in the last round. But of course, if it came down to the Conservative parties, the 170, 180,000 or so, then we saw that at hustings after hustings, Boris Johnson was the one who was loudly cheered. He is very much the hero among them. And surely, if the vote was up to them, Boris Johnson would be as good as through.
Tell me a little bit about this mini budget. It was, of course, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's brainchild. Why did it go down so badly with both the markets as well as the British public at a time when people are really braving this cost of living crisis?
Well, the budget was unrealistic. It was unsustainable. What happened is that Liz Truss had made promises that were undeliverable. When it came to the mini budget, she sought to give implementation to undeliverable policies. There was simply no way that a government already deep in debt and which got deeper into debt over borrowings over the furlough scheme would now say fund another 45 billion pounds straight in budget plus another 60 billion for energy subsidies and just dole out money to people. This is not sustainable. You can't borrow money from nowhere where you don't have it.
Okay.
And the market could see that. So she lost credibility. The budget lost credibility, she lost credibility, and that is why the markets reacted.
I'm also curious and interested to know this whole possibility, and right now it's in the realm of speculation, but this possibility that if it goes to the wider Conservative Party members, then Boris Johnson stands a very good chance. What then happens to the entire history around him? I mean, the Partygate scandal and all the other scandals that eventually brought him down.
It gets taken over by democracy. That it is then the rules of the Conservative Party of the 1922 committee that it may set. If it then puts the vote, and rather than going through extensive campaigning, if it were to go for a one-shot vote among Conservative Party members, and if then Boris Johnson were to contest, then he's as good as won. There is very little doubt about that. The very mention of Boris Johnson through those hustings, and that was a contest between...
All right, Sanjay, if you're still there, just a quick word. I think the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, has said that there should be general elections now. The British people deserve a chance and a choice to shape the future of their country. Is that a possibility at all? Not least because the Conservatives know if they go back to the people of Britain right now, they're not particularly well placed. All right, Sanjay's not there. Let's try and see if we can connect to other expert voices as well. So this is the big story breaking right now, this hour here on CNN News 18. Liz Truss has gone down in history, or infamy if you will, as the shortest serving Prime Minister of Britain, merely a month and a half, exactly 45 days after she was sworn into office, after she won the Conservative Party leadership race, beating Rishi Sunak. She has now decided to step down. She's going to continue for another week as caretaker Prime Minister, and in that week, a vote is expected to happen to decide who is going to be the next Conservative Party leader and therefore the Prime Minister of Britain. Now, if it goes back to the Conservative Party members, almost 200,000 of them, then Boris Johnson stands a chance of coming back, despite all the Partygate scandal and all the other scandals that eventually took him down. But if it was just the members of parliament, the Conservative MPs, who were to vote to decide who's going to be the next Prime Minister, then, as Sanjay Suri said, Rishi Sunak, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, stands a very good chance of becoming the next Prime Minister of Britain. It's going to be a very, very closely watched contest. Remember, Liz Truss had almost put the entire country and certainly the financial markets in turmoil after that mini budget that was presented earlier this month. That, of course, was the trigger. That, of course, was the final tipping point, if you will, that brought her government down. The finance minister had to resign, and just yesterday, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, in what was seen as the last nail in the coffin, also decided to quit. So that's the breaking story right here on CNN News 18. Liz Truss, the Prime Minister of Britain, has stepped down.
We delivered on energy bills and on cutting national insurance. And we set out a vision for a low-tax, high-growth economy that would take advantage of the freedoms of Brexit. I recognise, though, given the situation, I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party. I will remain as Prime Minister until a successor has been chosen. Thank you.
Do you sense that even with the unprecedented majority that the BJP government has, UCC is just too hot a potato for it? It wants to possibly delay it as much as possible.
फारूक अब्दुल्ला साहब का नाम तो नहीं लिया, पर उन्होंने कहा कुछ लोग हैं जो कह रहे हैं कि जब तक इनको जस्टिस नहीं मिलेगा ये होता है। किसकी जस्टिस की बात कर रहे हैं? एसजी साहब also turning around and showing him the mirror.
With Mr. Kharge's victory, the fact remains that Mr. Kharge's biggest stumbling block will be to at least dent the image that he's a candidate of the Gandhis, that he's not going to do anything that the Gandhis don't want him to do.
As per the law, those convicted of dacoity, robbery, murder with rape are not to be released on furlough. Gurmeet Ram Rahim is convicted of 2 murders and 2 rape. How is he out for 40 days?
Hello and a very warm welcome. This is a very special broadcast and you are watching it with me, Rihatul Siddiqui. Now the population debate is back and so is the discourse on population policy and infiltration in border areas. After the RSS chief Mohan Bhagwat, now RSS General Secretary Dattatreya Hosable has stepped into the population round. What are his views? Now he says that religious conversion and undocumented migrants, in fact, from neighbouring countries were among the reasons causing population imbalance in India. Hosable also made these comments on the last day of RSS National Executive meeting in Prayagraj and also spoke about concerns being expressed regarding religious conversion in the country. Now, throwing in his 2 bits on anti-conversion, he said that RSS believes that people who converted from Hinduism to other religions should not get the benefits of reservation. Hosable also talks about existing policies on population control and goes on to say that they could reduce the number of young persons in the country. Remember, these statements at a time when the BJP-led Uttar Pradesh government is preparing to bring a new law on population control. Does it make BJP RSS appear like a house divided? But whether it is Mohan Bhagwat's Vijay Dashmi address or Hosable's recent